The stars had been quiet for 3 weeks. Captain Park Tae-won stood at the bridge of the horizon's edge, watching the endless black through the main viewport. His crew of 4 worked silently at their stations, running the same routine checks they had run 100 times before. It was supposed to be a simple survey mission. Map the outer spiral arm, collect data, go home. Nothing exciting, nothing dangerous. That changed in an instant. Kim Yuna's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "Captain, I'm picking up something on long-range sensors." She leaned closer to her screen, her fingers flying across the controls. "Multiple contacts, large ones." Park walked to her station. "How many?" Yuna did not answer right away. Her face had gone pale. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. 10,000. Maybe more." The bridge fell silent. Baek Jin-ho at the navigation console turned to look at them, his young face filled with confusion. Choi Dong-hyuk stopped his work on the engineering panel. Even Han Soo-min, who had been reviewing medical supplies in the corner, looked up from her tablet. Park kept his voice steady. "Show me." The main screen flickered to life. At first, there was nothing but stars. Then the view shifted, and Park felt his stomach drop. Ships, thousands of them. They emerged from subspace like a swarm of insects, blocking out the stars behind them. The smallest vessels were the size of cities. The largest ones were something Park's mind could not fully accept. They were bigger than moons. "They're heading this way," Jin-ho said. His hands shook as he worked his console. "At current speed, they'll reach us in 12 minutes. Dong-hyuk spoke from the engineering station. "Captain, we can't outrun that. Our engines aren't fast enough, not even close." Park knew he was right. The Horizon's Edge was a survey ship, built for long journeys and careful observation. It was not built for escape. He looked at his crew. They were scared. He was scared too, but fear would not save them. "Yuna, open a channel. All frequencies." Yuna stared at him. "Sir? If they wanted us dead, we'd already be dead. They're coming to talk, so let's talk." Before Yuna could respond, her console lit up with an incoming transmission. The signal was powerful, cutting through every system on the ship. The lights flickered, the screens glitched, and then a voice filled the bridge. It was not human. The sounds were strange, clicking and humming in patterns that made no sense. But beneath the alien noise there were words. Someone had translated their message into human language. "Small vessel, you will answer. Are you alone, human?" The voice was cold, patient. It spoke like something that had asked this question 1,000 times before and always received the answer it wanted. Park looked at his crew. Yuna's hands hovered over her console. Dong-hyuk gripped the edge of his station. Soo-min had moved closer to the others, her medical tablet forgotten. Jin-ho was frozen at navigation, his eyes wide. Park pressed the communication button. "This is Captain Park Tae-won of the human vessel, Horizon's Edge. We are on a peaceful survey mission. We mean no harm." Silence. The fleet continued to approach. Then the voice returned. "You did not answer the question. Are you alone, human? Or are there more of you?" Park's blood ran cold. He understood now. This was not a greeting. It was an assessment. Whoever controlled that fleet wanted to know if humanity was a threat, and depending on his answer, they might decide to find out for themselves. Before he could respond, the ship shuddered. Jin-ho called out in alarm. "Something's got us! Some kind of energy field! We're being pulled toward the flagship!" Park grabbed the railing as the Horizon's Edge was dragged through space like a toy on a string. The massive flagship grew larger and larger in the viewport until it filled everything. Its hull was covered in strange symbols and what looked like trophies, pieces of other ships, fragments of metal and bone arranged in patterns. The ship was pulled into a docking bay so large it could have held a small moon. The Horizon's Edge settled onto the floor with a heavy thunk. Everything went quiet. Dong Hyuk checked his systems. Engines are locked. Weapons offline. They've got complete control of our ship. Park straightened his uniform. Then we go meet them. Everyone with me. Sir, Su-min said carefully, shouldn't some of us stay with the ship? Park shook his head. If they want to kill us, hiding on the ship won't help. But if they want to talk, we should all be there. We're stronger together. They gathered at the main airlock. Park stood at the front, with Yuna at his right and Dong Hyuk at his left. Su-min and Jin Ho stood behind them. 5 humans facing the unknown. The airlock hissed open. Standing before them was a figure that made Park's heart stop. It was tall, nearly 3 meters, with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that glowed with a faint golden light. It wore armor that seemed to be made from the remains of countless other beings, bones, metals, crystals, all woven together in terrible beauty. Behind this figure stood hundreds of soldiers. They were not all the same species. Park could see dozens of different forms, some with scales, some with fur, some with shapes he could not describe. All of them wore the same symbol on their armor. All of them served the same master. The tall figure stepped forward. When it spoke, its voice was the same one that had come through their communication system. But now there was something else in it. Curiosity. I am Queen Velthara, supreme ruler of the Dominion of the Thousand Suns. For 10,000 years my empire has ruled this galaxy. Every species either joins us or falls before us. She leaned closer to Park, her golden eyes studying him like a scientist studying an insect. I have conquered 200 civilizations. I have ended 47 species who refused to submit. And in all that time, I have never seen creatures like you. Park met her gaze. He did not look away. The Queen's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. I will ask you one more time, human, and you will answer truthfully, or your crew will die slowly while you watch. She leaned so close that Park could feel the cold radiating from her body. Are you alone, or are there more of you? The docking bay was silent. 1,000 eyes watched. The fate of humanity hung on Park's next words. He took a breath, and instead of answering, he asked a question of his own. Why does it matter? The silence that followed Park's question was absolute. Every soldier in the docking bay stood frozen. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Queen Velthara stared at the human captain with an expression that no one in the Dominion had ever seen on her face before. Surprise. Commander Roxul, who stood at the Queen's right side, reached for his weapon. You dare question the supreme ruler? I will tear your tongue from your... The Queen raised one long finger. Roxul stopped instantly, his hand still on his weapon, his body locked in place by nothing more than her gesture. Interesting, Velthara said softly. She studied Park the way one might study a puzzle. In 10,000 years, no creature has ever answered my question with a question. They beg, they lie, they confess everything in hopes of mercy, but they always answer. She tilted her head. You are either very brave or very stupid. Park kept his voice calm. Maybe both. Something flickered in the Queen's golden eyes. It might have been amusement. She straightened and turned to her soldiers. Take them to the observation quarters. They are to be kept alive and comfortable, for now. Roxul stepped forward. My Queen, surely we should... I have spoken, Commander. The Queen's voice carried no anger, but Roxul flinched as if she had struck him. These creatures interest me. I will learn more about them before I decide their fate. The human crew was escorted through the massive ship. Park walked at the front, keeping his head high even as his mind raced. He had bought them time. But time for what? The corridors of the flagship stretched on forever. The walls were lined with strange displays, artwork, weapons, and objects that Park could not identify. But it was the beings they passed that truly shocked him. There were hundreds of different species aboard this ship. Some walked freely, wearing the Dominion's symbol with apparent pride. Others moved in groups, their heads down, their movements careful. Slaves, Park realized, or something close to it. Kim Yuna walked beside him, her eyes taking in everything. "Captain," she whispered, "I'm counting at least 40 different species just in this section. If the whole empire is like this..." "Then they've conquered more worlds than we can imagine," Park finished. "I know." They were brought to a large room with transparent walls that looked out into space. The room was comfortable, soft furniture, clean surfaces, even what appeared to be food and water. But the door sealed behind them with a heavy click, and Park knew they were prisoners no matter how nice their cage looked. Choi Dong-hyuk immediately began examining the walls and furniture. Han Soo-min checked the food and water with her medical scanner. Baek Jin-ho stood at the transparent wall, staring out at the fleet that surrounded them. "There are so many ships," Jin-ho said quietly. "How can anyone fight something like this?" "We're not here to fight," Park said. "Not yet. Right now, we learn, we watch, we wait." Hours passed. The crew took turns resting while others kept watch. Dong-hyuk discovered that their room was monitored, but found no obvious weapons or threats built into the walls. Soo-min confirmed that the food was safe to eat, though she could not identify what most of it was made from. Then the door opened, and Queen Velthara entered alone. She moved with the grace of something ancient and powerful. Park stood to meet her, placing himself between the Queen and his crew. She noticed this and smiled. "You protect them," she observed, "even though you cannot possibly defend them against me." "It's what a captain does." Velthara sat on one of the chairs, making herself comfortable, as if this were her own throne room. "Sit, Captain Park. I wish to understand you." Park sat across from her. His crew stayed back, watching nervously. "The Dominion has existed for 10,000 years, Velthara began. In that time, we have met many species. Some were powerful, some were weak, some were wise, and some were foolish. But all of them shared one thing. When faced with our might, they understood their place. They submitted, or they were destroyed." She leaned forward. "But you did not submit. You did not even try to escape, though you must have known it was hopeless. Instead, you answered my question with a question. Why?" Park thought carefully before speaking. "Because I needed to know what kind of being I was dealing with. A conqueror who asks questions before attacking is different from one who shoots first. You wanted information. That means you can be reasoned with." "Reasoned with?" Velthara's laugh was like ice cracking. "No one reasons with the Dominion. We take what we want. Then why are we still alive?" The Queen's laughter stopped. She studied Park for a long moment. "Because you are new. In all our conquests, we have never encountered humans before. You are unknown, and the unknown deserves study before it is classified." "Classified as what?" "Useful or useless, dangerous or harmless, worth keeping or worth destroying." She stood, walking to the transparent wall. "Every species falls into one of these categories. Soon you will too." Soo-min spoke up, her voice shaking slightly. "What happens to the species you find useless?" Velthara did not turn around. "The archive keeps their remains, their cultures, their achievements, their biology, all preserved for study. It is a mercy, really. They live on in our records, even after their worlds are dust." The crew exchanged horrified looks. Yuna gripped Park's arm tightly. "And humanity?" Park asked. "What do you think we are?" The Queen finally turned. Her golden eyes seemed to glow brighter. "That is what I intend to discover. You will remain here while I investigate. My scholars will study your ship. My soldiers will test your capabilities. and when I have learned enough, I will decide." She walked toward the door, then paused. "But I will tell you this, Captain. My commander believes you should be destroyed immediately. He says your species adapts too quickly, questions too much, refuses to accept its place. He sees you as a threat." "And what do you see?" Park asked. Velthera smiled, and for the first time it seemed almost genuine. "I see something I have not seen in a very long time." "Something interesting." The door closed behind her. Dong Hyuk let out a long breath. "So we're lab rats now. Wonderful." "Better than dead rats," Yuna said grimly. "At least we have time." Park looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth continued to orbit its sun, unaware that its existence might soon be discovered by an empire that had crushed hundreds of civilizations. He thought about his home, his family, everyone he had ever known. "Time is exactly what we need," he said. "While they study us, we study them, learn their weaknesses, understand their empire, find out what makes them afraid." "They don't seem afraid of anything," Jinho said. Park turned to face his crew. "Everyone is afraid of something. An empire that's lasted 10,000 years? They're afraid of change. They're afraid of anything that threatens what they've built." He looked at each of them in turn. "We might be small, we might be weak, but we're something they've never seen before. And that scares them more than they'll ever admit." Sumin nodded slowly. "So what do? We survive. We learn. And when the time is right, we show them exactly what humans are capable of." Outside the transparent walls, the Dominion fleet hung in the void like a gathering of predators. But among them, 5 small humans had planted the first seeds of something new, something the Dominion had not faced in 10,000 years. Hope. 3 days passed aboard the Dominion flagship. The human crew was kept in their quarters, fed regularly, and watched constantly. Soldiers stood guard outside their door at all hours. Cameras tracked their every movement. They were prisoners in a golden cage, waiting to learn their fate. On the 4th day, the door opened and a new figure entered. This one was different from the soldiers they had seen before. It was smaller, older, with pale blue skin covered in wrinkles and spots that might have been age marks. It walked slowly, leaning on a staff that hummed with faint energy. Most striking were its eyes, large, dark, and filled with something the humans had not seen in any Dominion member before: sadness. "I am Archivist Meknal," the creature said. Its voice was soft, almost gentle. "I have been sent to interview the one called Kim Yuna, the communications expert." Yuna looked at Park, who nodded slowly. She stepped forward. "I'm Yuna." Meknal studied her with those large, dark eyes. "Come with me. The Queen wishes to understand how you decoded our transmission so quickly. Your linguistic abilities interest her." Yuna followed the archivist out of the room. The door sealed behind them, leaving the rest of the crew to wait and worry. Meknal led Yuna through corridors she had not seen before. These passages were quieter, darker, lined with shelves that held objects she could not identify. They walked in silence for several minutes before the archivist spoke again. "You are afraid," Meknal said. It was not a question. "Wouldn't you be?" "I have been afraid for 6,000 years, the archivist replied. "One learns to live with it." They entered a massive chamber that took Yuna's breath away. It stretched as far as she could see, filled with towering shelves, glowing displays, and countless artifacts. There were weapons, artwork, clothing, technology, and things she could not even begin to understand. Each item was carefully labeled and preserved. "Welcome to the Archive of Fallen Worlds," Meknal said. "This is my domain. Everything you see here once belonged to a civilization that no longer exists." Yuna felt a chill run down her spine. All of this? These are from species the Dominion conquered? Conquered. Absorbed. Destroyed. Mechnal walked slowly between the shelves, running a wrinkled hand along the displays. The Dominion has ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. In that time, we have encountered 217 intelligent species. Most chose to join us willingly. They saw our power and submitted. Their cultures now exist within the Dominion, changed but alive. The archivist stopped at a particular shelf. On it sat a simple clay pot, cracked and worn by time. The Velturi made pots like this one, Mechnal said softly. They were artists, poets. They believed that beauty was the highest form of worship. When the Dominion came, they refused to submit. They said they would rather die free than live as servants. The archivist touched the pot gently. They got their wish. This pot is all that remains of their entire civilization. Yuna's stomach turned. 47 species. The Queen said she had destroyed 47 species. 47 who refused to submit. 47 who chose death over obedience. Mechnal's voice carried no pride, only weight. I have cataloged all of them. Their languages, their histories, their dreams. I keep them here so they are not completely forgotten. That's horrible, Yuna whispered. Yes, Mechnal agreed. It is. They continued deeper into the archive. Yuna saw technological marvels and primitive tools side by side. She saw artwork that made her want to cry and weapons that made her want to run. Each item told a story of a people who no longer existed. Then they reached a section that was different from the rest. It was sealed behind a heavy door, marked with symbols that seemed to pulse with warning. What's in there? Yuna asked. Mechnal hesitated. For a long moment, he simply stared at the door. Then he spoke in a voice so quiet, Yuna had to lean close to hear. The unsorted. What does that mean? The archivist glanced around, making sure they were alone. Not every species encountered by the Dominion was conquered. A few, a very few, were deemed too dangerous to absorb. Not because they were powerful, but because they were unpredictable. Species that could not be controlled, could not be understood, could not be safely brought into the Empire. Yuna's heart beat faster. What happened to them? We left them alone, sealed their territories, erased them from our star charts. In 10,000 years, there have been only 3 such species. Mechnal's dark eyes fixed on Yuna. The Dominion does not fear strength. We have crushed species with weapons that could crack planets. What we fear is chaos, change, beings that refuse to fit into our understanding of how the universe works. The archivist leaned closer. The Queen asked your captain if humanity was alone. Now I ask you the same question, Kim Yuna, but my reason is different. Why do you want to know? Mechnal's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Because I have watched the Dominion for 6,000 years. I have seen species rise and fall. I have recorded their deaths and preserved their memories. And I am tired. His eyes seem to grow even darker with emotion. The Queen believes the Dominion will last forever. But nothing lasts forever. One day, something will change. Something will challenge the empire that has stood for 10 millennia. He gripped Yuna's arm with surprising strength. I asked if you were alone because I hope you are not. I hope there are more humans out there. Many more. Because this empire needs to be challenged, and you, your species, you are the first beings I have met in centuries who refuse to answer a simple question from the most powerful ruler in the galaxy. Yuna stared at the old archivist. Behind them, the archive of fallen worlds stretched endlessly, filled with the remains of civilizations that had thought they were safe, thought they were strong, thought they could survive. Humanity is not alone, she said finally. There are billions of us. And we look out for each other. Something changed in Meknal's face. It took Yuna a moment to recognize it as hope. Good, the archivist whispered. Because the Dominion's greatest weakness is something they have never understood. They believe unity comes from submission. They believe loyalty comes from fear. They have never seen a species that stays together because they choose to, not because they are forced. He released her arm and stepped back. I will return you to your quarters now. We will not speak of this conversation. But remember what I have shown you. And remember this. The Dominion has conquered 200 species, but they have never faced one that could inspire others to resist. As they walked back through the archive, Yuna looked at the countless artifacts around her. Each one represented a tragedy, a failure, a world that had stood alone and fallen alone. But humanity was not alone, and maybe, just maybe, that would make all the difference. Meanwhile, in the humans' quarters, Baek Jin-ho had been studying the Dominion's navigation systems through the limited data their room's displays allowed. He called Park over with barely contained excitement. Captain, look at this. There are gaps in their star charts, entire regions they haven't mapped. Park studied the display. The gaps were small, but they were there, and they corresponded to areas near human-controlled space. They don't know where we come from, Park realized. They found us by accident. Jin-ho nodded. Which means they can't find Earth. Not yet. Park felt the first real spark of hope since they had been captured. The Dominion was powerful beyond imagination, but they were not all-knowing. They had weaknesses, and humanity had something they had never faced before. Time to prepare. The summons came on the 7th day. Soldiers entered the humans' quarters without warning, their weapons drawn, their faces hidden behind identical masks. Commander Roxul stood at their head, his golden armor gleaming with cruel light. The Queen has made her decision, Roxul announced. His voice dripped with satisfaction. You will be tested. If you prove worthy, you may earn the right to speak for your species. If you fail, he smiled, showing rows of teeth like broken glass. Your remains will join the archive. Park stepped forward, placing himself between Roxul and his crew. What kind of test? A simple one. Survival. The commander gestured to his soldiers. Bring them. The crew was marched through the flagship to a massive arena carved from the ship's hull. Thousands of Dominion citizens sat in viewing platforms above, their countless forms creating a sea of alien faces. At the center of the arena stood a raised platform where Queen Velthara watched from her throne. Park and his crew were brought to the arena floor. The ground beneath their feet was marked with old stains that might have been blood. The walls were scorched and clawed, bearing witness to countless battles that had taken place here. The trial of worth, Velthara's voice echoed through the arena. For 10,000 years, those who wish to join the Dominion must prove their value. Your species is unknown to us. Today, we will learn what humans are made of. Park looked at his crew. Yuna was pale but determined. Dong Yuk's jaw was set with stubborn anger. Su Min held Jin Ho's arm, both of them trying to hide their fear. What must we do? Park called out. One of you will enter the pit, Velthara replied. You will face the creatures we use for population control. If you survive until I am satisfied, you earn the right to speak. If you die, your crew will follow. Roxul stepped forward with a small blade and a length of metal that might have been a club. These are your weapons. Choose your champion. Before anyone else could speak, Park took the weapons. I'll do it. Captain, no! Yuna grabbed his arm. Let me. This is my responsibility. Park's voice was firm but gentle. I brought you all out here. Whatever happens, it happens to me first. He stepped toward the pit at the arena's center. It was a deep hole, perhaps 20 meters across, with walls too smooth to climb. At the bottom, shadows moved in patterns that made Park's stomach turn. "Captain Park Tae-wan," Velthara called out. "You choose to fight for your crew. This is noted." She raised her hand. "Begin." The floor beneath Park's feet opened, and he fell into darkness. He hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact. The pit was darker than he expected, lit only by faint bioluminescent patches on the walls. The air smelled wrong, like metal and decay and something alive. Movement in the shadows. Park gripped his weapons and waited. The first creature emerged from the darkness like a nightmare-given form. It was built like a spider but sized like a horse, with too many legs and a mouth that opened in 4 directions at once. Its eyes, dozens of them, reflected the faint light as they fixed on Park. It charged. Park dove to the side, feeling the rush of air as the creature's claws missed him by centimeters. He swung the metal club at its legs, connecting with a crack that echoed through the pit. The creature screamed, a horrible sound, but did not fall. It turned and charged again. Above, in the viewing platforms, the crowd watched with hungry eyes. Roxul smiled with anticipation. But in the humans section, Choi Dong-hyuk was not watching Park. He was watching the arena's systems. "There," he whispered to Yuna. "Environmental controls. The arena has adjustable gravity and lighting." Yuna followed his gaze to a control panel built into the wall near their position. "Can you reach it?" "I can try." While the guards focused on the fight below, Dong-hyuk edged toward the panel. His fingers found the controls hidden by his body from the nearest soldiers. He could not read the alien symbols, but engineering was universal. He began testing buttons. In the pit, Park was losing. The creature was faster than him, stronger than him, and it was not alone. A second monster emerged from the shadows, this one long and serpentine, with scales that sparked with electricity. Park backed against the wall, blood dripping from a cut on his arm, his breathing ragged. The spider thing lunged. Park raised his club. And suddenly the gravity shifted. The creature stumbled, its many legs scrambling for purchase on ground that was no longer pulling straight down. Park felt the change too, but he was ready. Humans had evolved in gravity. They knew how to fall. He used the moment to strike, driving his blade into the spider thing's underbelly. The creature thrashed and fell. Park pulled his weapon free and turned to face the serpent. Above, Dong-hyuk made another adjustment. The lights in the pit flickered, creating shadows where there had been none. The serpent hissed, its electrical sense confused by the changing environment. Park attacked. He did not fight like the Dominion expected. He did not try to overpower the creatures or stand his ground against superior force. He moved constantly, using the shifting conditions to his advantage, striking when the creatures were off balance, retreating when they recovered. He fought like water, flowing around obstacles, finding the path of least resistance. The serpent struck at him with electrified fangs. Park dodged, grabbed a loose scale that had fallen from its body, and used it to redirect the creature's own electrical discharge back at it. The serpent convulsed and fell. The crowd had gone silent. Queen Velthara leaned forward on her throne, her golden eyes fixed on the human in the pit. This was not how conquered species fought. They did not adapt. They did not improvise. They either stood and died with honor or ran and died with shame. This human did neither. "Enough," she said. The arena's systems powered down. Light flooded the pit, and Park stood among the fallen creatures covered in blood, some of it his own, most of it not. He was breathing hard, his body shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline, but he was alive. Roxul's smile had vanished. He turned to the queen with urgency. "My queen, this proves nothing. One human defeating arena beasts. It proves everything, Commander." Velthara's voice was thoughtful. "Did you see how he fought? He did not try to win. He tried to survive, and he used every advantage available to him." Her eyes narrowed. "Including help from his crew." Dong-hyuk froze at the control panel. Guards suddenly surrounded the humans, weapons raised. "You think I did not notice?" The Queen almost sounded amused. "The environmental fluctuations, the gravity shifts, your engineer is creative." She stood from her throne. "Another species would have let their champion die alone. You chose to help him, even knowing the risk of discovery." Park was lifted from the pit and brought back to his crew. They gathered around him, Sumin immediately checking his wounds, the others forming a protective circle. "This is what confuses me about humans," Velthara said, descending from her platform to stand before them. "You are weak individually, fragile, short-lived. You have no natural weapons, no armor, no special senses. By every measure, you should be among the least threatening species we have ever encountered." She stopped directly in front of Park. "And yet you survive, you adapt, you help each other even when it serves no logical purpose." She turned to Roxul. "The commander believes your kind should be destroyed immediately. He says you are too unpredictable, too dangerous." "And what do you believe?" Park asked. The Queen studied him for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than before. "I believe you are the most interesting thing I have encountered in a very long time, and I am not yet ready to destroy something interesting." She turned and walked away, her guards falling in behind her, but her final words echoed through the arena. "Return them to their quarters, and Commander, double the surveillance. I want to know everything about these creatures." As the humans were led away, Roxul watched them go with hatred burning in his eyes. The Queen might be fascinated by these humans, but the commander knew a threat when he saw one, and threats needed to be eliminated. Word spread through the flagship like fire through dry grass. A human had survived the trial of worth. Not just survived, he had won. He had defeated creatures that had killed warriors from a dozen different species, and he had done it with help from his crew, working together even when separated, even when it meant risking their own lives. The conquered peoples of the Dominion had not seen anything like it in generations. In the lower decks, where the servant species lived and worked, whispers passed from being to being. In the engine rooms, where massive creatures turned machines with their bare hands, the story was told between shifts. In the kitchens, the cleaning halls, the maintenance tunnels, everywhere the Dominion's subjects gathered, they spoke of the humans. Han Su-min discovered this when she was taken to the medical bay. One of the guards had been injured during the arena event, not by the fighting, but by a piece of equipment that malfunctioned. The Dominion's own medical staff was occupied with more important patients, so Su-min was brought to treat the minor wound. It was beneath the dignity of the Empire's doctors to tend to common soldiers. The guard was from a species Su-min did not recognize. He had gray skin, 4 arms, and eyes that shifted color with his emotions. When Su-min approached with her medical supplies, he flinched away. "I won't hurt you," she said gently. "I'm a doctor. Let me see your wound." The guard stared at her with confusion. "You help me? But I am your captor." "You're injured. That's all that matters right now." She cleaned and bandaged his wound with careful hands. The guard watched her the entire time, his eyes shifting through shades of blue and green. When she finished, he spoke again. "You are like the stories say. The human from the arena, he helped a creature too. After he defeated it, he tried to stop its bleeding instead of letting it die." Su-min remembered. Park had done that without thinking, his instincts as a person overriding his situation as a prisoner. It had confused the Dominion observers greatly. "That's just who we are," she said. "We help people, even when it's hard, even when they're supposed to be our enemies." The guard's eyes turned a deep purple, an emotion Su-min could not read. "My people were conquered 300 years ago. We were told that the strong rule and the weak serve. That is the way of the universe. No one helps the weak." No one protects those who cannot protect themselves. That's not how humans see it. No. The guard looked down at his bandaged wound. No, it is not. When Su Min returned to their quarters, she found she was not the only one who had been making connections. Kim Yuna had been permitted to access certain parts of the archive for her linguistic studies. In truth, she had been using every opportunity to speak with members of other species, learning their languages, their histories, their grievances against the Dominion. "They're not loyal," Yuna reported quietly, aware that they were being monitored. She spoke in codes they had developed over the past days, hiding their true meaning in innocent phrases. "They're obedient because they're afraid, but fear isn't the same as loyalty." Baek Jin-ho had found something equally important. During his navigation consultations, the Dominion wanted to know how human ships traveled through space. He had mapped out the flagship's communication systems. More importantly, he had found weaknesses. "The Dominion controls information tightly," he explained. "Each conquered species is kept isolated from the others. They're not allowed to communicate directly. Everything goes through Dominion channels." "Divide and conquer," Park said. "Keep everyone separate so they can't organize." "Exactly. But the system has gaps, maintenance frequencies, internal channels that aren't monitored as closely." Jin-ho's eyes were bright with possibility. "If we could access those channels..." "We could let them talk to each other," Dong-hyuk finished, "for the first time in centuries." The plan was dangerous. If discovered, they would be executed immediately. But what choice did they have? The Queen had not decided their fate yet, and Commander Roxul clearly wanted them dead. They could wait to be killed, or they could try something. They chose to try. That night, or what passed for night on the flagship, when the lights dimmed and activity slowed, Queen Velthera came to their quarters alone. Park was awake, watching the stars through their transparent walls. He heard the door open and turned to find the Queen standing in the entrance, without guards, without ceremony. She looked almost ordinary in the dim light, almost tired. "You do not sleep," she observed. "Neither do you." Velthera moved to stand beside him at the window. For a long moment they simply watched the stars together. "I have ruled the Dominion for 8,000 years, she said finally. "I have seen species rise and fall. I have made decisions that ended civilizations and choices that saved them. I have done what I believed necessary to maintain order in a chaotic universe." Park said nothing. He sensed she needed to speak more than she needed answers. "When I ask a new species if they are alone, I am asking many questions at once. Are you a threat? Do you have allies? Can you be safely absorbed into the Empire?" She turned to look at him. "But you answered my question with a question. You asked why it mattered. And I have been thinking about that ever since. What have you concluded?" The Queen was silent for a moment. "That perhaps I have been asking the wrong question for 8,000 years. She walked to a chair and sat down. Her usual regal bearing softened by something Park could not quite name. Doubt, perhaps, or loneliness. "What makes your kind fight so hard?" she asked. "I watched you in the arena. You were outmatched in every way. But you did not give up. You did not accept your fate. Other species, when they face impossible odds, they surrender, they bargain, they beg. You did none of these things." Park thought carefully before answering. "Because we're never really alone. Even in that arena, by myself, facing those creatures, I wasn't alone. My crew was with me. They helped me even when they couldn't reach me. And if I had died, they would have carried on. They would have found a way to survive, to get home, to warn humanity. But why? What makes you so certain others will come for you?" "Because that's what we do." Park met her golden eyes. "We don't leave our people behind. We don't abandon the weak or forget the lost. Every human out there knows that if they're in trouble, others will come looking. It's not a promise we make. It's not a law we follow. It's just who we are. Velthera stared at him. In 8,000 years, I have never understood such a thing. The Dominion survives because we are strong, because we crush any who oppose us, because we make ourselves so powerful that no one dares challenge us. And yet you're afraid? The Queen's eyes flashed with danger. I fear nothing. You fear change, Park said quietly. You fear anything you can't control. That's why you ask if species are alone, not because you want to destroy them, but because you want to know if they could ever threaten what you've built. Velthera stood abruptly. For a moment, Park thought she would strike him. Instead, she walked to the door. Tomorrow my commander will present his recommendation to destroy your species. He will argue that humans are too dangerous to allow into the Empire, too unpredictable to control. She paused at the threshold. I have not yet decided whether to agree with him. What would change your mind? The Queen looked back at him. In the dim light, she seemed smaller than before, more uncertain. Show me something I have never seen in 10,000 years. Show me that there is another way. She left without another word. Park stood alone at the window, watching the stars. Tomorrow would decide everything. But tonight, for the first time since their capture, he felt something other than fear. He felt possibility. Commander Roxul made his move at dawn. Park woke to the sound of weapons charging. Soldiers flooded their quarters, not the regular guards they had grown accustomed to, but Roxul's personal troops, their armor marked with his insignia. The commander himself stood at their head, his golden eyes bright with triumph. By my authority as military commander of the Dominion fleet, I am placing these aliens under immediate execution order. Roxul smiled his broken glass smile. The Queen has been informed. By the time she objects, you will already be dead. Park pushed himself in front of his crew. The Queen hasn't made her decision yet. You're acting against her orders. The Queen is old and sentimental. She sees curiosity where she should see threat. I am protecting the Dominion from her weakness. Roxul raised his weapon. Any last words? Human? Before Park could respond, the lights went out. Not just in their quarters, throughout the entire section of the ship, darkness fell like a curtain. Roxul's soldiers stumbled, their weapons targeting systems going haywire in the sudden blackout. What is this? Roxul demanded. A voice came through the darkness, Archivist Mechnal, speaking through the ship's communication system. Commander, I'm afraid there has been a power fluctuation in this section. Maintenance teams are responding. Roxul's voice turned dangerous. Archivist, if you are interfering with Dominion military operations, I am merely an old keeper of records, Commander. I have no power to interfere with anything. In the confusion, Park felt a hand grab his arm. He could not see who it was, but the grip was familiar. Four-fingered, strong, but gentle. The gray-skinned guard that Su Min had helped. This way, the guard whispered. Quickly. The humans were guided through the darkness, moving through corridors they could not see, trusting in hands that belonged to species they had never met. They passed through maintenance tunnels and service passages, always moving, never stopping. Behind them, Roxul's voice echoed with fury. Find them! Search every deck! They emerged in a part of the ship Park had never seen, the lower levels where the conquered species lived and worked. Dozens of beings surrounded them, their forms barely visible in the emergency lighting. Some had scales, some had fur, some had shapes that defied description. But they all shared one thing. They were looking at the humans with something Park had not expected. Hope. We heard the stories, one of them said, a tall, thin creature with skin like bark. The human who survived the trial, the doctor who healed her enemy, the crew that works together even when separated. "We have waited for something like this for generations," said another, a being covered in blue feathers that shimmered even in the dim light. "Someone who could show us another way." Yuna stepped forward. "We're just 5 people. We can't fight the Dominion." "You don't have to fight," Mechnal said, emerging from the shadows. The old archivist looked more alive than Park had ever seen him. "You just have to show them it's possible. The Dominion's power comes from one thing, the belief that resistance is futile. Break that belief, and the Empire cracks." Dong Hyuk was already at a control panel. "The maintenance frequencies Jinho found, I can route them through the entire ship, every conquered species able to talk to each other for the first time." "Do it," Park said. Dong Hyuk's fingers flew across the controls. Throughout the flagship, communication channels that had been sealed for centuries suddenly opened. Species that had never been allowed to interact found themselves connected. In the engine rooms and the kitchens, in the cleaning halls and the medical bays, beings who had suffered in isolation discovered they were not alone. The effect was immediate. Not a coordinated rebellion, nothing so organized. Instead, 1,000 small acts of defiance. An engineer who accidentally reduced power to Roxul's section, a cook who mistakenly prepared food that the commander's species found disgusting. Maintenance workers who took just a little too long to respond to military requests. Service creatures who suddenly forgot how to understand Dominion commands. Chaos spread through the flagship like a gentle wave. Nothing violent. Nothing that could be punished as rebellion. Just a ship full of beings who had suddenly remembered that they were not machines. Roxul was furious. He stormed through the corridors, demanding order, threatening punishment. But his soldiers could not be everywhere at once, and every time they restored control in one area, problems emerged in another. In the throne room, Queen Velthara watched through surveillance feeds as her flagship descended into gentle chaos. She could crush it easily. A single command, and her loyal forces would restore order through blood. That was the Dominion way. But she did not give the command. Instead, she watched a group of species she had conquered centuries ago working together to hide the humans. She saw beings who had been forbidden to communicate now coordinating through improvised signals and shared looks. She witnessed an empire she had built on fear and isolation being quietly undermined by something she had never anticipated. Connection. Park and his crew made their way through the chaos, heading for the docking bay where their ship was held. They were not alone. A dozen different species helped guide them, each one passing them along like a relay race. But as they neared the bay, Roxul found them. The commander stood in their path, his personal guard surrounding him, his weapons drawn. Behind him, the docking bay doors were sealed. "Clever," Roxul admitted. "You've turned our own subjects against us. Created disorder where there was order. But it changes nothing. You're still weak, still fragile, still just 5 small creatures against the greatest empire in the galaxy." Park stepped forward. "You're right. We are weak. We are fragile. We can't defeat you in a fight." "Then surrender." "No." Park's voice was steady. "Because we don't have to defeat you. We just have to show everyone else that you can be defied. Look around, Commander. Your empire isn't falling apart because of 5 humans. It's falling apart because you built it on loneliness. You kept every species separate, afraid, isolated. And the moment they started talking to each other, the moment they realized they weren't alone, your power started crumbling." Roxul's face twisted with rage. "Pretty words. Let's see how pretty they are when I tear them from your throat." He lunged at Park, faster than any human could react. His claws reached for Park's neck and stopped. The gray-skinned guard stood between them, all 4 arms holding Roxul's attack at bay. Behind him, other conquered species stepped forward, forming a wall between the commander and the humans. "What is this?" Roxul snarled. "You dare raise hands against your masters?" "You are not my master," the guard said. His voice shook, but he did not back down. You are my captor. There is a difference." For a moment, everyone stood frozen. Then Roxul laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You think this changes anything? I will call reinforcements. I will have every one of you executed. The Dominion will endure, as it always has." "Perhaps," said a new voice. Queen Velthara stepped through a side entrance, her golden robes sweeping the floor. She looked at the scene before her. Her commander held at bay by species he had spent his career oppressing, her subjects standing together for the first time in centuries, and 5 small humans at the center of it all. "Or perhaps," she continued, "it is time to consider a different way." The throne room of the Dominion flagship had never been so full. Queen Velthara sat on her ancient throne, but she was not alone. Around her stood representatives of every species aboard the ship, the conquered and the conquerors, the servants and the soldiers, beings who had never been allowed in this sacred space now standing shoulder to shoulder. At the center of the room stood Park Tae-won and his crew. They were battered and exhausted, their uniforms torn, their bodies bearing the marks of everything they had survived. But they stood tall. Commander Roxul knelt in chains before the Queen, his golden armor stripped away, his soldiers standing guard over him rather than with him. "You have committed treason against the Dominion," Velthara said to her former commander. Her voice was cold, but there was no anger in it, only a terrible weariness. "You acted without my authority. You attempted to murder beings under my protection. You would have started a war without my consent." "I was protecting the Empire," Roxul spat. "These humans are a disease. They infect everything they touch with their chaos, their questions, their refusal to accept their place. If you had let me destroy them, if I had let you destroy them, I would have learned nothing." The Queen stood from her throne and walked down the steps until she stood before Park. "And I have learned much." She turned to address the assembled beings. "For 10,000 years, the Dominion has ruled through strength, through fear, through the simple understanding that we were too powerful to challenge. And it worked. We built an empire that spans a galaxy. We brought order to 1,000 worlds." Her golden eyes swept across the crowd. "But order is not the same as peace. Obedience is not the same as loyalty, and a throne built on fear stands only as long as the fear remains." She looked at Park. "When I first asked if you were alone, I expected the answer that every species gives. You would tell me of your numbers, your weapons, your worlds, hoping to earn mercy through information. Instead, you asked me a question. Why does it matter?" The Queen smiled, not her predator's smile, but something softer, something almost human. "I have thought about that question for many days now, and I finally have an answer." She turned back to the assembled crowd. "It matters because an empire that fears being challenged is an empire that knows it can be defeated. It matters because I have spent 8,000 years making sure no one ever asks that question. It matters because the moment you asked it, you reminded me that the Dominion is not invincible. Nothing is invincible. Nothing lasts forever." She raised her hand, and the great doors of the throne room opened. Beyond them, visible through the transparent walls, the stars stretched endlessly into the void. "These humans will be released," Velthara announced. "They will return to their people with my message. The Dominion does not seek war with humanity. Not because we fear them. We could crush their worlds without difficulty. But because they have shown me something I had forgotten." She looked at Park one final time. "They have shown me that there is more than one kind of strength, more than one way to build an empire. And perhaps, after 10,000 years, it is time to try something new." The crowd stirred with shock and wonder. Species that had never dared to hope began to whisper among themselves. Something was changing, something fundamental. Park stepped forward. "What about them?" He gestured to the gathered, conquered species. "The ones who helped us? The ones who stood up to your commander. What happens to them?" The Queen considered this. For a long moment, the throne room held its breath. "They will not be punished," she said finally. "What they did, it was not rebellion. It was something else. Something I have not seen in a very long time." She looked at the gray-skinned guard who had protected Park, at Archivist Mechnal, who had given them hope, at all the beings who had risked everything for strangers. They showed loyalty, not to me, not to the Dominion, but to each other, to the belief that the strong should protect the weak instead of crushing them. She returned to her throne. Perhaps that is a kind of loyalty worth having. The humans were escorted to the docking bay, where the Horizon's Edge waited. The ship had been repaired, its systems restored, its engines ready to carry them home. But before they boarded, Park turned to face the beings who had gathered to see them off. Mechnal was there, his ancient eyes brighter than Park had ever seen them. "You have done something remarkable," the archivist said. "In 1 week, you have changed what 10,000 years of conquest could not." "We didn't change anything," Park said. "You did, all of you. You were the ones who chose to help us, who chose to stand together. We just gave you a reason." The gray-skinned guard stepped forward. He still did not know the creature's name. In all the chaos, they had never been properly introduced. "What do we call you?" Park asked. "I am called Verak," the guard said, "and I will remember your name, Captain Park Tae-wan. All of us will." "Remember more than our names," Yuna said. "Remember what we showed you. You're not alone. You were never alone. You just forgot how to find each other." The humans boarded their ship. As the engines powered up and the docking bay doors opened to the stars, Park took one last look at the Dominion flagship. Through the viewport, he could see Queen Velthara watching from an observation deck, her golden form unmistakable even at this distance. She raised one hand. Not a wave, not a threat, just an acknowledgement, one leader to another. Park nodded in return. The Horizon's Edge launched into the void, leaving the Dominion fleet behind. The journey home would take weeks, but they were no longer prisoners. They were messengers, carrying news of what they had witnessed to a humanity that had no idea what was waiting in the depths of space. As they traveled, Yuna worked on her reports. Dong-hyuk documented everything he had learned about Dominion technology. Su-min recorded her observations of the various species they had encountered. Jin-ho plotted courses and calculated distances. And Park thought about what came next. The Dominion was still out there, still powerful, still dangerous. The Queen had released them, but that did not mean peace. It meant opportunity, a chance to prepare, to grow, to find allies among the stars. When they finally reached human space, they were greeted by a sight that made Park's heart swell. Ships, thousands of them. Word of their capture had reached Earth, and humanity had responded. The fleet had mobilized in days, crossing vast distances on the chance that they might find their lost ship. "Captain," Jin-ho said, his voice thick with emotion, "we're receiving hails from the fleet commander. They want to know if we're okay." Park opened the communication channel. His face appeared on screens across hundreds of vessels, seen by thousands of humans who had traveled across the stars for 5 strangers. "This is Captain Park Tae-wan of the Horizon's Edge," he said. "We're okay. We're home. And we have a story to tell you." As the fleet surrounded them, guiding them toward Earth, Yuna moved to stand beside Park. "Do you think the Queen was telling the truth? About not wanting war?" Park watched the human ships around them, each one crewed by people who had come to help, who had refused to leave their own behind. "I think she meant what she said. The Dominion isn't ready for war with us, not because we're stronger than them. We're not. But because we showed her something she'd never seen before." We showed her that you don't have to be alone to be strong. That connection is more powerful than fear. That the species she conquered for 10,000 years could be allies instead of servants." He smiled. "She's scared of what that means, and she should be." The Horizon's Edge docked with the flagship of the human fleet. As Park stepped through the airlock, he was met by the fleet commander, a gray-haired woman with sharp eyes and a firm handshake. "Captain Park, we thought we'd lost you." "You almost did. But we weren't alone out there." He looked back at his crew, at the ship that had carried them through the impossible. "We're never really alone." Behind them, somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, the Dominion continued its ancient work. But something had changed. Seeds had been planted. Connections had been made. And one day, perhaps sooner than anyone expected, those seeds would grow into something even the greatest empire in the galaxy could not control. The humans had been asked if they were alone. Their answer had changed everything.